My name is Madeline Carter. I'm 36 years old, a former operations officer with the U.S. Army, and until 7 years ago, I sat on the executive board of Carter Holdings, until my own family decided my name no longer belonged there. They didn't remove me with a vote. They didn't call me into a meeting. They simply stopped saying my name. No invitations, no signatures, no public statements. Not even a phone call when my grandfather, the one person who believed in me, passed away. The first time I saw my name again wasn't in a headline or a family announcement. It was on an envelope. Plain ivory, Vanessa's handwriting sharp as ever. Madeline Carter. The name they'd spent years trying to forget. Now written out in ink again. I should have ignored it. Tossed it unopened. But I didn't. Because that envelope wasn't just an invitation to Vanessa's wedding. It was a message. And I wasn't about to let it go unanswered. By the time I stepped into the Wexford Grand Hall, no one was expecting me. My name wasn't on the guest list. The concierge said so. The family didn't acknowledge me. But I showed up anyway. Not with anger. Not with a scene. Just with presence. And then, when Samuel Blake, the man standing at the altar next to my sister, turned and said in front of everyone, "Ma'am, may I have a word with you before this continues?" The entire room turned with him. All eyes, all whispers, all faces. My name wasn't on their list, but it never needed to be. Before I tell you exactly what happened next, and how my family tried to erase me completely, if you've ever been cut out, left off, or treated like you don't exist, drop a comment below. This story isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming what they thought they could write off. Now, let me take you back to where it really began. I stared at it on the kitchen counter, untouched since I picked it up from the lobby box an hour ago. Pale ivory, raised ink. Vanessa's handwriting hadn't changed, a curve too sharp on the R in Carter. There it was. The name they erased from every document, every announcement, every dinner seating chart. And now, written plain as daylight. Madeline Carter. Late afternoon light angled through the blinds, streaking the wall in faded gold. I hadn't bothered turning on the lamp. Shadows stretched long across the floor, brushing against boots I hadn't worn in months. My service boots. Still laced, still ready. Just like me, in theory. My medals sat in the far corner shelf, the cheap wooden case gathering dust. No visitors ever saw them. No visitors came. No reason to hang them up when the only people who would care spent the last 7 years pretending I didn't exist. I crossed the kitchen slowly, letting my bare feet touch the cool linoleum. The envelope still hadn't moved. As if it were waiting. Express mail. Paid overnight. I could almost hear Vanessa's voice giving the instruction. Make sure she gets it, whether she opens it or not. I didn't tear it open. Not yet. Instead, I leaned against the counter, letting my hands fold over my stomach, pressing down on the ache that always settled there this time of year. November. The anniversary of a lot of things. My last deployment. My last board meeting at Carter Holdings. My last real conversation with my father. Robert Carter hadn't exactly been subtle. The last time I saw him, I was wearing my dress blues, standing in the Carter Holdings conference room while shareholders filed out. He didn't shake my hand, didn't ask about the weather. He'd just said, "You're not a Carter anymore, Madeline. We can't afford the headlines." I didn't say anything then, just like I didn't say anything now. My fingers traced the edge of the envelope, thick cardstock, too formal for a casual invite. Definitely Vanessa. She never did anything halfway, not even erasure. It would be easier not to open it. Toss it in the trash. Let the past stay exactly where I left it. Fold it up, sealed away. But easy never really suited me. I grabbed a butter knife from the drawer, slid it under the flap. One clean cut. The card inside was white with gold lettering. Wexford Grand Hall. Sunday, November 12th, 2023. Formal attire required. Vanessa Carter and Samuel Blake. The name hit harder than I expected. Samuel Blake. I set the card down flat, palms braced on either side of the counter now. Breathe in. Breathe out. For a moment, I let myself look around the apartment like a stranger. Bare walls, one couch, service plaque on the shelf, old boots by the door. This wasn't a home. It was a waiting room. For what? I grabbed the invitation again. My thumb hovered over the embossed lettering. One part of me wanted to crumple it, tear it into strips. Another part, the quieter part, knew that wouldn't fix anything. Slowly, I walked to the junk drawer, pulled out a roll of clear tape. Instead of destroying it, I ran the tape across the slit I'd just made, sealing it back together. Like nothing had ever happened. Like nothing was ever broken. I slid the envelope into my coat pocket. It didn't matter if I wasn't on their official guest list. I was showing up anyway. The kitchen felt too quiet after that. Too empty. My hand moved almost on instinct, reaching for the old cell phone resting on the counter. I hadn't used the contact in years, but the number was still there. Samuel Blake. I hit call. It rang once. Then I hung up. Some people get erased from a list. Others never needed to be on it in the first place. By the time I stepped through the revolving glass doors of the Wexford Grand Hall, late morning light had sharpened into something colder than autumn should allow. Thin slices of sun streaked the marble floors beneath my boots, as if even the light hesitated to reach me. I kept my coat buttoned. Dark gray. Nothing flashy. My old service boots polished but worn. The kind of outfit that said I wasn't here to impress anyone and wouldn't care even if I could. The lobby was quiet, all polished brass railings and hushed voices echoing off high ceilings. White lilies in glass vases stood on every surface, like pale sentinels. Vanessa's signature. Of course. I approached the concierge desk. No one else was waiting. The young man behind the counter wore a name tag that said Derek. His suit looked crisp, hair clipped military short. For a moment, it felt like walking into a barracks, except there was too much gold trim. He smiled politely. Good morning. Welcome to the Wexford Grand Hall. May I help you? I didn't bother with pleasantries. I pulled the invitation from my coat pocket and slid it across the desk, tapping 2 fingers on the edge. Carter wedding? I said. Madeline Carter. His eyebrows lifted slightly as he opened a large black guest registry book. His hands moved fast. Professional. Fingers sliding down rows of perfectly printed names. Then they stopped. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said, voice tightening just enough to notice. There's no reservation under Madeline Carter. Of course not. I shouldn't have expected anything else. I swallowed once, letting my gaze drift past him to the towering arrangement of lilies nearby. The smell was too clean, too clinical. I'm family, I said calmly. Derek hesitated again. Perhaps you were registered under a different name. I said nothing. My pulse didn't even jump. Ma'am? He prompted. Behind me, a burst of polite laughter echoed from somewhere deeper in the hotel, probably from the pre-ceremony brunch. The part I hadn't been invited to. I closed my eyes for half a second, picturing the gold-lettered invitation now taped neatly back together in my pocket. Not on the list. Just like Robert Carter always said, you're not a Carter anymore. Don't worry about it, I said, voice even. I'll find my way. Derek opened his mouth to protest, but I'd already turned away. My boots clicked softly against the marble, each step deliberate. I wasn't going to beg for a clipboard signature. Near the main ballroom entrance, I caught sight of someone I half recognized. A cousin, maybe. Evan, or Everett. One of the side branch Carters I hadn't seen since my grandfather's funeral. His eyes flicked toward me, widening a fraction before flickering back to the glass of champagne in his hand. Awkward. That was the word. Not surprise. Not anger. Just that stiff discomfort rich families perfected. He raised his glass slightly, as if to say hello. I didn't return the gesture. Instead, I stepped toward the mirrored wall near the ballroom's entryway. My reflection looked the same as always. Dark hair pulled back. Neutral expression locked tight. I could almost hear my grandfather saying, "A Carter doesn't show what they're thinking unless it serves a purpose." I exhaled through my nose and slid one hand inside my coat. Fingers closing around the cold metal waiting there. The insignia wasn't flashy, just a small pin, bronze and worn smooth at the edges. My division's mark. Something no one in that ballroom would recognize or care about. But I would. Slowly, carefully, I pinned it to the left side of my coat, just above my heart. The clasp clicked shut with a quiet finality. If they wouldn't say my name, I'd show them who I was anyway. I turned back toward the room, letting my eyes drift across the crowd through the open doors. Men in tailored suits, women in sleek dresses. Every single face turned just slightly away from me. I didn't flinch. Then, behind me, a voice spoke. Clear, measured, cutting straight through the quiet. "Excuse me, Madeline? Some people know you by accident. Others, by intention." The hotel bar was quieter than I expected for a Saturday night, but that suited me. Dark wood paneling, low brass lighting, and a jazz trio playing soft enough to fade into the walls. The kind of room meant for quiet deals and quieter regrets. I sat near the far end, my back to the door, coat still buttoned, insignia pin flashing dull bronze against the dim light. I didn't order a drink. I wasn't here for comfort. My fingers brushed the folded document inside my coat pocket, feeling its weight. Not just paper, but history. The will. The reason I was here. Behind me, footsteps slowed. A pause. Then his voice. "Madeline." I didn't turn right away. I wanted to see if the name still meant anything to me before I let it show on my face. It did. More than I wanted to admit. Samuel Blake stepped into my line of vision, taking the seat across from me without asking. Navy suit. No tie. The kind of confident, casual men like him wore without effort. His hair was shorter than I remembered. The same sharp lines to his face. Except now there was something heavier in his expression, a quiet drag at the corners of his mouth. "Samuel," I said evenly. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure you'd notice if I did." A flicker of something in his eyes. Regret, maybe, but I didn't trust it yet. "Vanessa didn't mention—" he began. "No," I cut in. "She wouldn't." The silence between us stretched just long enough to be deliberate. A beat set by two people used to talking only when necessary. I let my gaze drift around the room once before landing back on him. "So," I said finally, voice low, "you're marrying into Carter Holdings now." His jaw shifted, barely perceptible. "That's one way to put it. And is that why you're here? Playing family politics?" Samuel's fingers tapped once against the bar's polished surface. He didn't answer right away, which told me everything. "Vanessa's smart," he said at last, "but she's not careful." Careful. That was a word that carried weight in boardrooms and battlefields alike. "Neither am I said. He glanced down briefly, then back up. "Why didn't you tell me back then?" The flashback came unbidden. 2016. Strategy Conference in D.C. I'd been standing in uniform, holding a briefing file, while Samuel Blake, up-and-coming tech director, walked into the room and ignored everyone but me. We'd talked for maybe 6 minutes. Enough to know. Enough to remember. "I didn't think it mattered," I said quietly. "Back then." Samuel's jaw flexed again. "Madeline." You should have told me sooner, he said. And you, I returned without missing a beat, should have remembered me. That landed. The silence after felt different, denser somehow. The jazz trio shifted into a slower tempo in the background, notes dropping like careful footsteps. Samuel leaned in slightly, voice lower now. This isn't just about the wedding, is it? I didn't blink. From my coat, I drew the folded copy of my grandfather's will, placing it flat on the table between us. Unfolded just enough for the signature line to show. His hand moved automatically, fingertips brushing the edge as if to pull it closer. But I wasn't finished. Before he could take it, I slid it back toward myself, folding it once more. Samuel's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the way he sat. Less relaxed now. That was fine. That was exactly where I wanted him. Nights before weddings are supposed to be sleepless, just not for the reasons I had. The clock on the nightstand read 12:03 a.m., but I hadn't even tried to sleep. The hotel room smelled faintly of fresh linen and polished wood. Too clean, too quiet. My jacket hung on the chair, the insignia pin still clipped to the lapel. Across from me, on the low dresser, sat a box I hadn't seen until I walked in. No note, no sender information. Just a plain wooden box, smoothed at the edges like something meant to be held. I sat on the edge of the bed, feet planted firmly on the floor, staring at it for a full minute before reaching out. My fingers traced the lid, then slowly lifted it open. Inside, on a fold of black velvet, lay an old hair clip. Silver, tarnished in places, a simple clasp with tiny inlaid stones, some missing. I remembered it instantly. It had been mine first, until Vanessa asked for it. I'd handed it over without thinking, like sisters do when things still feel simple. Back when names didn't carry weight, just sound. Seeing it now, I couldn't decide whether it felt like a peace offering or a warning. I set the box aside, pulling on my coat again. The room was too still. I needed air. Outside, the hotel courtyard glowed under muted lamps. Low hedges framed slate pathways, and a single wooden bench sat beneath a bare-limbed tree. November had stripped most of the leaves. My boots crunched lightly against stray gravel as I walked. The sky was clear, sharp stars, no moon. I slowed near the bench, one hand trailing along its back rail. Memories crept in, quieter than footsteps. Vanessa, age 8, running circles around me with that clip in her hair, laughing. Robert watching from the balcony with arms folded. Evelyn calling from the doorway, voice clipped and formal even then. Names weren't just names in our family. They were currency, and I'd spent mine long before I realized the cost. A voice broke the quiet. Couldn't sleep either? I turned. An older man stood near the hedge, silver hair tucked under a Wexford cap. Uniform, but not concierge. Groundskeeping staff, maybe. Something like that, I said. He smiled, easy, unbothered. Big event tomorrow. Always brings out the ghosts. Something like that? I repeated, lips twitching dryly. He glanced toward my coat, nodding once at the pin. Military? Once. He didn't push, just walked past, slow and deliberate, broom in hand. Names carry weight, he said as he went. You keep yours steady. I stood there a while longer after he disappeared, breath fogging in the cold air. When I finally pulled out my phone, it was with the same kind of certainty as lacing up boots before a deployment. No drafts, no saved messages, just a blank screen waiting for me to type. I didn't hesitate. Do you even remember me? I sent it to Vanessa. One line, nothing more. The screen lit up a second later. Delivered. And that was it. No typing dots, no reply, just silence again. The difference between a guest and a ghost is whether anyone notices when you stand. I didn't stand. Not yet. I sat in the very last row of the Wexford Grand Hall, coat buttoned, hands resting quietly in my lap. From here, the aisle stretched long and polished, like a runway designed to make certain people shine and others disappear. The taped wedding invitation rested in my pocket. I could feel its shape against my hip, a small folded weight, like a name I'd never quite let go of. The hall was full. Rows of chairs in cream and gold ribbon, filled with suits and dresses, all turned toward the wide oak doors at the back of the room. The music had already started. Something soft and orchestral, familiar only because I'd sat through 100 corporate events with the same soundtrack. No one turned to look at me. Not Robert, not Evelyn. My parents sat up near the front, perfectly framed in the aisle view. Robert's posture straight-backed, hands folded, face neutral. Evelyn's chin lifted slightly, as if the air were thinner up there. I didn't flinch. I didn't shift. I simply watched. The officiant stood beneath a floral arch, glancing down at a folded script. Beyond him, Samuel waited. Tall, composed, navy suit sharp as the edge of a blade. His hands were loose at his sides, shoulders relaxed. But I knew that stance too well to mistake it for calm. It was a soldier's stance, prepared for movement. The doors opened. The room inhaled as one. Vanessa stepped into view, framed in white silk and trailing lace. Her dress was elegant, understated in a way that still cost enough to feed an army. Her hair pinned back, bare shoulders, a slight tilt to her chin that matched Evelyn's exactly. She looked like she belonged. I wondered, briefly, if she even knew I was there. If some part of her had scanned the room already, eyes sharp beneath mascara and facade. Or if she'd genuinely erased me so thoroughly from her version of the world that my shadow didn't even register. Her steps were slow. The aisle stretched longer with every second. I didn't move. Halfway down, she caught Samuel's eye. He didn't smile. One more step. The music slowed. Or maybe it only felt that way to me. Then, Samuel did something I didn't expect. His shoulders shifted. A pause. Not a stumble. Not hesitation. But something deliberate. A choice. The officiant's words faded into silence. Samuel turned. Not just a glance. A full turn. Away from Vanessa. Away from the aisle. His eyes met mine across the rows of seated guests. Controlled. Steady. Then, clearly enough for everyone to hear, he said, "Ma'am, may I have a word with you before this continues?" It was like a ripple through the room. Heads turned. One by one. All eyes, all faces, landed on me. And I didn't stand. Not yet. I let them look. Let them remember. Madeline Carter. The name they spent years trying to forget. The only thing colder than wedding champagne is the room where they hide the truth. The conference room off the main hall wasn't meant for family meetings. It was meant for corporate deals and quiet signatures, the kind of space where names were treated like assets. Thick carpet, frosted glass walls, a long table in the center. Samuel held the door open for me without a word. His posture didn't waver, but I caught the tension in his jaw. Always composed. That much hadn't changed. Vanessa walked in next, veil pinned back, dress swaying like she still believed the show wasn't over. Robert followed, voice low and clipped as he spoke to Evelyn behind him. The door clicked shut. Silence. I didn't sit. I stepped to the head of the table instead, one hand sliding into my coat pocket. The taped wedding invitation brushed against my knuckles, but that wasn't what I reached for. I pulled out the folded paper. Thick, off-white, creased once across the middle. My grandfather's will. Laid flat on the table. Nobody moved right away. Only the quiet hum of the building's air vents broke the stillness. Vanessa's voice came first. Light. Dismissive. "Madeline, what are you doing?" Samuel stepped closer behind her, not quite standing at her side. I ignored the question. Instead, I unfolded the will slowly, fingers pressing it flat along the grain. The signature line gleamed faintly under the overhead lights. Empty. No notary stamp. No official seal. "Do you remember this?" I asked quietly. Robert's mouth tightened. Evelyn crossed her arms. Vanessa's expression didn't flicker. "Whatever you think you're doing." "I'm not thinking," I cut in. "I'm showing." I tapped the signature block once with my index finger. "This isn't the copy Carter Holdings filed." I let my voice stay level. "That version had a notary stamp. This one doesn't." Robert glanced at Vanessa, sharp and fast. She smiled, tight and small. "Madeline, you've been out of the loop for years. We had to finalize certain things. You didn't respond to legal notices because I was overseas." The words landed like a dropped stone. "You knew that." Samuel's jaw shifted, but he didn't speak. His eyes moved between us, calculating. Vanessa's voice hardened. "You're not even listed in the shareholder registry anymore." That's the part I'm here to discuss. The weight of the room shifted. It wasn't loud, but I could feel it. The way air changed just before a storm broke. "My grandfather always said," I continued, "paper is patient, but names aren't." I let that settle before adding, slower now, "You wore my name long enough, Vanessa." Her hands tightened against the fabric of her dress. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Robert cleared his throat. His voice wasn't as firm as it once was. "We can handle this after today." "No," I said. "We handle it now." Evelyn opened her mouth, but before she could speak, a sharp flicker cut through the silence. A camera flash. We all turned toward the door. Through the frosted glass, blurred but unmistakable, a figure with a camera phone held up. The glow of a screen bright against the dim hallway. One picture. One shot. Someone was already watching. Sometimes, the fastest weapon isn't a gun. It's a whisper. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, the entire lobby of the Wexford Grand felt like it was holding its breath. Not just because of what had happened in the conference room hours earlier, but because word had already leaked. My name was in the air again, spoken quietly, passed from one set of lips to another. Madeline Carter, the forgotten sister, the missing shareholder, the woman no one had put on the list. I stood near the window wall, watching the last burn of orange fade out of the sky. Across the marble floor, clusters of guests huddled together, heads bowed over phones. Every few minutes, a journalist drifted through the revolving doors, some subtle, some carrying camera gear too large to ignore. Vanessa's voice echoed in my head, sharper than memory should allow. "You'll regret making noise." But I wasn't the one whispering this time. "Ms. Carter?" I turned slowly. A man stood a few paces away. Tall, lean, late 30s. He wore a gray suit slightly too loose at the shoulders, like it had been tailored for someone else. His hair was neat. His expression wasn't. "I don't do interviews," I said flatly. "I'm not press," he answered. "Name's Jason Whitmore, legal consultant, used to work with Carter Holdings." My eyes narrowed, assessing. Friend or opportunist? I wasn't sure yet. "And what exactly do you want from me, Mr. Whitmore?" "Nothing." He smiled once, sharp and brief. "But I think you'll want something from me." Before I could respond, Samuel appeared at my side. No surprise, he'd been hovering at the edge of the room since we left the private meeting. Always a half step behind, never directly interfering. "Problem?" Samuel asked quietly, eyes flicking to Jason. "Not yet," I said. Jason held up both hands, open-palmed. "Just here to deliver something. Think of it as insurance." He reached into his pocket, drawing out a slim black USB drive. Plain. Unmarked. "What's on it?" I asked. Jason glanced around, lowering his voice. Original recording. Your grandfather's final meeting with the board. Before things got rewritten. That landed heavier than I let show. Samuel stiffened slightly beside me. Why now? I asked. Why not 7 years ago? Jason's smile tightened. 7 years ago, I liked my job. And my paycheck. He shrugged once, unapologetic. Things change. I didn't take the USB yet. My gaze flicked towards Samuel. He was watching Jason with the same careful calculation I felt simmering in my own chest. Samuel? I asked, voice low. He exhaled slowly, not quite looking at me. I knew, Samuel admitted finally. Not everything. But enough to recognize a forged document when I saw it. The weight of that settled between us like lead. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, voice sharper now. Because by the time I realized how deep it went, Samuel said quietly, I was already tied to the family. Jason cleared his throat once, drawing the focus back to him. Look, he said, I don't care who wins, but I do care about keeping my record clean. So, he held out the USB between 2 fingers. Keep it safe, Jason said. I took it. The metal felt colder than it should have. Before I could pocket it, my phone buzzed. Screen lit up. Unknown number. I tapped to open. One line of text. Cease and desist. Formal order. Stop all claims against Carter Holdings immediately. Vanessa's lawyer. Of course. I looked up from the screen, meeting Samuel's eyes again. The whisper war had officially begun. You can't erase ink, especially the kind that stains your hands forever. By 9 a.m., the courthouse steps already felt hotter than they should have in mid-November. Not the weather, just the press. Reporters clustered in small knots near the entrance, cameras slung over shoulders, eyes sharp. None of them said my name. Not yet. But I could feel it. The waiting. The taped invitation was still in my coat pocket. A constant wait now. Not just paper anymore. Proof of why I was standing there in the first place. Jason Whitmore stood beside me. Same gray suit. Same unreadable expression. His briefcase hung from one hand, unlatched but steady. You sure about this? He asked quietly. I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped forward, pushing through the revolving door into the lobby. Cold marble floors, high ceilings, a smell like old paper and polished wood. The city courthouse wasn't grand, but it had presence. Names carved into stone along the top arch. Justice, law, integrity, words easier to cut into granite than live by. The clerk's counter was on the left. 2 lines already forming, half civil, half criminal. I didn't need the criminal desk today. Jason nudged his case open as we approached, pulling out a thin folder. Inside, everything. The notarized copy of my grandfather's will. The USB drive contents printed in transcript form. Affidavits. My own formal statement. Don't rush it, Jason murmured. Once we file, it's public. That was the point. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with sharp glasses, barely glanced up when I laid the folder on the counter. New filing? She asked. Yes, I said. Emergency injunction. She flipped through the first few pages. Her eyes paused on my name. Madeline Carter, she read aloud. As in. Exactly as in, I confirmed. A flicker of something. Recognition, curiosity. Maybe both. But she didn't comment further. Just stamped the first page with a thick, deliberate thump. One page, then another. Behind us, the sound of camera shutters picked up again. Reporters pressing their faces against the glass doors. Jason kept his back turned, body angled slightly in front of me like a shield. The clerk finished her stamps and pushed the papers back. Assigned Judge Morrison, she said. Hearing in 48 hours. Until then? Her hand moved automatically, reaching for a red ink stamp this time. Restraining order issued. The letters bled deep into the page. Temporary restraining order against Carter Holdings. Effective immediately. Jason let out a slow breath beside me. I didn't. Instead, I took the stamped packet, folded it once, and slipped it into my inner coat pocket beside the invitation. Outside, the press was already shouting by the time we stepped back onto the courthouse steps. Ms. Carter, is it true your family forged legal documents? Do you plan to take control of Carter Holdings? Is this revenge or justice? I kept walking, pace steady. Jason followed half a step behind. Halfway down the block, my phone buzzed again. I glanced down. The screen lit up with a national news feed. Headline already running in bright red letters. Carter family scandal. Vanessa, Carter responds. I tapped it open without slowing my stride. Vanessa appeared on screen, perfectly lit, hair immaculate, voice calm as ever. There's no truth to these claims, she said smoothly. We love Madeline, but unfortunately, not all family disputes are meant for the public eye. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Deny everything. Of course she would. The whisper war was over. Now it was all out in ink. The first strike hits hard. The counter-strike aims to bury. By Monday night, my apartment felt smaller than it ever had. Shadows stretched long across the floor, broken only by the flicker of my television. I wasn't watching by choice. The noise found me anyway. Every channel, every headline, Carter family war, forgotten heiress or fraud. On one screen, a news anchor leaned forward with the practiced concern of someone paid not to care. Sources suggest Madeline Carter has a history of psychological instability following her military service. I turned the volume down, but not off. Letting it sting. Letting it burn. If they hit back, it means you're hitting right. My instructor's voice still echoed in my head, clear as rifle reports in morning drills. It didn't make it easier. There was a knock. 2 sharp raps against my door. I didn't get up right away. I already knew who it was. Jason stood in the hallway, same gray suit, tie askew like he'd stopped caring about appearances. He didn't bother waiting for me to invite him in. They're not pulling punches, he said, dropping his briefcase onto my counter. You saw the segment? Every channel, I answered quietly. Jason's jaw tightened. They're hitting where it hurts. Your record, service accusations, unstable behavior, trying to paint you as unreliable before the injunction hearing. I leaned against the kitchen island, arms crossed. The taped wedding invitation still rested in my pocket, a quiet weight I couldn't ignore. For the first time since I'd walked back into the grand hall, something inside me cracked. Maybe they're right, I said under my breath. Maybe I should let it go. Jason's head snapped up. Don't. I met his gaze. Steady. Exhausted. I didn't come back for revenge, I said slowly. Just clarity. And now. Jason cut me off, voice lower now. You back down now, Madeline. They'll erase you twice. I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up my phone, scrolling through the endless notifications, texts from unknown numbers, voicemails I wouldn't bother opening. That's when Samuel's name flashed on screen. I stared at it a second before answering. Madeline. His voice came through, calm and controlled as always. You listening? Barely, I admitted. If you walk away now, Samuel said quietly, they win twice. Silence stretched between us. I closed my eyes, forcing one long, slow breath. When I opened them again, my hand moved automatically toward Jason's briefcase. The USB was still there, untouched. I pulled it free, slotting it into my laptop without another word. Jason stepped closer, eyes flicking to the screen as I opened the folder labeled simply, Last Recording. The file played, static at first, then voices. My grandfather's, clear, firm, followed by Vanessa's. I don't care what the paperwork says. We'll make it look right. My pulse stopped. There it was. Her voice. Her words. The quiet, unmistakable sound of fraud. And just like that, the doubt fell away. They hadn't buried me yet. The ones who speak least carry the most power, especially in court. The arbitration room inside the city courthouse wasn't as grand as the boardrooms I remembered growing up in. No polished mahogany, no chandelier lighting, just beige walls, a long oak table, and the steady weight of law stitched into the silence. Judge Morrison sat at the head, gray hair sharp against a dark robe. His eyes gave away nothing, no flicker, no twitch, not even when both sides had walked in. Vanessa on one side, seated between Robert and Evelyn, her lawyer flanking her. I could feel their collective posture like cold iron pressed against my skin. I sat opposite them, with Jason Whitmore seated quietly beside me. My hands rested flat on the table, no fidgeting, no show of nerves. Grandfather used to say, "Choose your moment, then say only what matters." This was the moment. Judge Morrison glanced down at the slim file already laid before him. Arbitration in the matter of Carter Holdings versus Madeline Carter, he said simply. Let's proceed. Vanessa's lawyer spoke first, slick, confident, rattling off pre-written objections about standing, family privacy, reputational harm. I let it wash past me like static. When Morrison's gaze shifted in my direction, I slid the USB across the table. My grandfather's last board meeting, I said evenly. Full recording, along with the original unsigned copy of his will. Jason leaned forward, offering the formal affidavit Jason himself had filed. His voice stayed low, professional, as he confirmed the document's chain of custody. Vanessa didn't move. Not once. Her face was still, sculpted into something close to calm. Only her hands betrayed her, fingers tightening imperceptibly in her lap. Robert looked everywhere except at me. Evelyn's mouth pressed into a thin line. Judge Morrison plugged the USB into the court's monitor system. The screen flickered. A single line of audio scrolled across. Then my grandfather's voice filled the room. There will be no changes. My name stays where it belongs. A pause. Vanessa's voice followed. Recorded. Undeniable. I don't care what the paperwork says. We'll make it look right. Silence settled in like smoke. Judge Morrison said nothing for a full minute. His hands folded once. Papers shuffled quietly beneath them. He didn't ask questions. He didn't comment. When he finally spoke, it was with the same slow deliberation as a man signing off on a weather report. From this moment forward, Morrison said clearly, Madeline Carter's name and rights are reinstated. The sentence hung there, heavy as iron. Vanessa's lawyer opened his mouth, then thought better of it. Robert still didn't look at me. Evelyn rose slowly, gathering her purse with mechanical precision. I didn't move until Jason nudged me lightly with his elbow. It's done, he murmured. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. The courthouse steps stretched before me, wide and pale under the morning sky. Samuel stood waiting near the bottom, coat buttoned tight against the wind. His eyes met mine as I approached, steady and quiet. Ready to tell the world? He asked. And this time, I didn't hesitate. Not every battle ends with gunfire. Some end with cameras. The hotel press room felt smaller than it was, packed shoulder to shoulder with bodies and voices and lenses. Dozens of reporters, flashing badges and holding out recorders like spears. Lights flared against the dark paneled walls, bouncing off the Carter name embossed in gold behind me. But today, I wasn't standing in its shadow. I was standing in front of it. Samuel Blake stood off to my left, silent, hands clasped loosely in front of him. No expression, no unnecessary movement, just presence. The podium was simple. No teleprompter, No script. I didn't need one. I took one slow breath, feeling the taped wedding invitation still tucked into my pocket. A reminder. My voice came steady, the same tone I'd used issuing field orders. My name is Madeline Carter. Flashes went off immediately. A ripple of camera clicks echoed off the walls. For years, I've stayed quiet, I said. Out of respect, out of discipline, because I believed silence was the higher ground. I let that hang for a second. But silence can also be erasure, and erasure is not something I will allow. A woman from one of the national networks raised her hand automatically, but I didn't pause. I am not here for revenge, I continued, eyes moving across the room. This is not about vendettas. It's about fact. I held up a thin folder, copies of the injunction order, the reinstatement ruling, and one page from the original will. Everything filed today is public record. Carter Holdings' leadership attempted to falsify legal documents to remove my name. That effort failed. The room went very still. For clarity, I added, my name, my title, and my rights have been fully reinstated under Judge Morrison's ruling. More flashes, more muted gasps. I watched Vanessa from the corner of my eye. She stood along the edge of the room, not at the podium, not quite in the shadows either. Perfectly placed, perfectly silent. Her face never cracked, but her hands were folded a little too tightly. I could feel Samuel beside me, unmoving. A deliberate choice, standing there, not as fiancé to Vanessa Carter, but as someone who'd seen the truth from both sides. One reporter finally called out loud enough to cut through. Ms. Carter, are you planning to take over the company? I looked directly at him. Some inherit titles, I said. I earned mine. The room exploded into noise. Questions layered over questions, hands waving in the air. I stepped back from the podium without answering anymore. Samuel moved with me, close, but not too close. We didn't speak until we'd cleared the hallway outside, where the sound of the press thinned into something like quiet again. Samuel glanced at me once, lips pressed flat. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. A single text appeared on the screen. There's one more thing you should know. ChatGPT Jan Noi, Mat So Su, that Gyu Trong Tam Nhin. Others lock themselves away. The attic of the Carter house smelled exactly the same as I remembered. Old cedar, dust, and a trace of cold air that never quite left the rafters. I stood beneath the sloped ceiling, light from a single exposed bulb casting long shadows across stacked boxes and forgotten furniture draped in white sheets. Wednesday morning light filtered in through a narrow window behind me. The house was quiet. Too quiet for what it used to be. Jason waited downstairs. He hadn't said much on the drive over, just a quiet nod when I said I needed to do this alone. No press, no cameras, no signatures, just me and the past. I stepped over a trunk labeled in fading marker, Summer 1989, and moved toward the far corner. There, beneath a stack of empty frames, sat the box I hadn't touched since the reading of the first will. The one my grandfather's lawyer had handed me years ago with quiet instructions. When the time's right. Now was the time. I crouched slowly, brushing dust from the lid. No lock. Just a brass latch, worn smooth from age. My fingers hesitated once on the edge, then I flipped it open. Inside, a single envelope, thick, yellowed paper. My name written in my grandfather's precise, deliberate hand. Madeline. I exhaled through my nose, sitting back against the wall. My boots scuffed the wooden floor, echoing louder than I wanted. The letter weighed more than it should have. I unfolded it carefully, the paper dry and stiff. His handwriting filled both sides. Sharp black ink. No wasted words. Madeline, if you're reading this, it means the house is no longer as quiet as it was meant to be. You already know what's been done, and who did it. I never trusted Robert to keep the legacy. I hoped Vanessa would know better. But I always knew it might fall to you. Names survive not by force, but by honor. That's all Carter Holdings ever meant to me. Not buildings, not money, the name. Protect it if you can. If not, walk away with your head up. Grandfather. The silence in the attic felt heavier after I finished, like the air had shifted just enough to make it real. He knew, not just suspected, not just worried. He'd left it here deliberately. A final task only I could open when it mattered most. I folded the letter again, pressing it flat. The envelope slid easily back into my pocket, alongside the invitation I hadn't thrown away. Steps creaked below. I stood slowly, hand braced on the attic beam, listening. Outside, through the narrow attic window, I caught the unmistakable flash of a silver car pulling into the driveway. Vanessa's. I let my hand fall away from the beam, the letter still tucked against my heart, and watched her car door swing open. There's always a quiet room after the storm. The living room in the Carter house wasn't as grand as the world believed. No gold trim, no marble. Just dark wood floors, pale walls, and windows that caught the last light of late afternoon. The kind of room that felt like it had held too many silences already. Today was no different. Vanessa sat on the far end of the couch, hands folded tight in her lap. Her dress was simpler now. No silk, no veil. Just a dark blouse and slacks that made her look smaller somehow. Robert sat in the armchair nearest the window, one hand resting on his knee, the other gripping a glass of water he hadn't touched. Evelyn perched on the edge of a matching chair across from him, spine so straight it looked painful. I stood in the middle, coat still on, the letter from my grandfather tucked safely into my pocket alongside the taped invitation. No one spoke. The air pressed against my skin, thick with things not said. I didn't break it. Neither did they. Finally, Robert cleared his throat. I dot. His voice cracked once before settling. We did things wrong, Madeline. That was it. No grand apology. No confessions. Just 6 words. Quieter than I'd ever heard from him in my life. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. This was never about the company, I said evenly, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. Not for me. Vanessa's hands tightened. Her knuckles stood out white beneath her skin. It was always about the name, I added. And you knew it. For a long moment, Vanessa didn't respond. Then, slowly, she reached into the folder beside her on the coffee table. A single sheet of paper, crisp, heavy stock, the legal release form, formal forfeiture of all claims, her signature already waiting in black ink. She slid it across the table without a word. Jason had drafted it that morning. Samuel had witnessed it. Now all that was left was acceptance. I took it without ceremony, folding it in half and slipping it into my coat pocket. The only sound in the room was the quiet tick of the old clock above the mantel. Robert didn't look at me again. Neither did Evelyn. Vanessa's eyes met mine once, brief and sharp, a flash of something between defiance and relief. But I didn't say anything else. I turned toward the door, boots whispering against the hardwood floor. And this time, I left the house without looking back. Some debts are settled in court, others over coffee. The cafe on the corner of 17th and L was quieter than I remembered. Brick walls, wide windows catching late November sun, a brass bell over the door that chimed once when I pushed through. Samuel was already there, seated near the window, jacket folded over the back of his chair, nursing a black coffee. He looked up the second I stepped inside. No suit today, just a dark sweater, sleeves pushed up to his elbows. I was late on purpose, not out of avoidance, just pacing, letting the quiet settle in fully before facing whatever this was. I crossed the room slowly, letting my boots echo once against the floorboards before pulling out the chair across from him. Still waiting on that apology? I asked, voice light. Samuel gave me a dry smile. Just the coffee. I pulled off my coat and draped it over the chair back, sitting down fully now. The sunlight caught the insignia pin still clipped above my heart. I hadn't taken it off. Probably wouldn't. The server approached, hovering politely, and I ordered plain black. No cream, no sugar. When they left, the silence stretched between us like old rope, not tense, but deliberate. So, Samuel said first, eyes flicking to the window. How does it feel? I leaned back, folding my arms across my chest. Lighter than I expected. No press outside? Not today. He traced one finger along the rim of his coffee cup. I filed my resignation yesterday. That caught my attention more than I let show. Carter Holdings isn't as fun without the scandal? I asked. Samuel's mouth twitched. Let's just say, I'm done carrying other people's weight. I nodded slowly, letting the words settle between us. For once, there was no tension, no agenda, just coffee. The server returned, setting my cup in front of me. I wrapped my hands around the heat without drinking, letting it warm my palms. Samuel watched me quietly, expression unreadable. Then, without looking away, I said, For once, it's not about legacy. It's just coffee. His smile widened a fraction, not sharp, not practiced, real. The bell above the door chimed again as someone left. Another quiet moment stretched between us. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Jason Whitmore. One line. Check your email. Of course. It never really ended. They erased me once. But ink fades. Names don't. Monday morning in D.C. came clear and cold, the kind of air that sharpened everything. Sounds, light, memory. From the window of my new office, I could see the curve of the Potomac in the distance, pale gray under early sun. The name on the glass door behind me said it clearly now. Madeline Carter, Director. Veterans Legal Aid Foundation. No middle initials. No hidden disclaimers. Inside, the space was simple. Clean wood desk, service plaques along one wall. The taped wedding invitation sat in a frame by the window. It didn't belong there by traditional logic, but tradition had never served me much. My new assistant, a woman named Lena, stepped into the doorway holding a clipboard. Younger, sharp-eyed, steady. Morning, Ms. Carter, she said, 2 calls holding, one from the city council, one from a journalist. I looked up from the file I'd been reviewing, new case intake from last week. Tell them both I'll circle back after lunch. Lena nodded once, professional, then disappeared down the hall. I sat back slowly, letting my hand rest against the desk's edge, fingers trailing the smooth grain. 7 years. That's how long it had taken from the day my name was removed from Carter Holdings to today. The laptop on my desk chimed. A new email. I opened it automatically. From Jason Whitmore. Subject. We're even now. No body text. No signature. Just those 3 words. I allowed myself one small smile. No more debts. No more leverage. Opening a side drawer, I pulled out the official Carter Holdings shareholder update, already framed. My name printed beside Vanessa's, now as co-founder. Not a silent partner. But it wasn't about the company anymore. It never really was. Standing, I walked to the door and pushed it open fully. My name on the plaque gleamed in sharp black lettering against brushed metal. Madeline Carter. For a moment, I let my hand rest against the edge of the frame. Then I stepped outside. Face calm, boots steady on the floor. No cameras, no headlines, just my name. And that was enough. After years of silence, Madeline Carter's name stood where it belonged, not as a shadow of her family, but as proof that truth survives even the deepest erasure. What began as quiet injustice ended with quiet dignity, reminding everyone watching that some battles are won not through force, but through relentless presence. Like ink on a forgotten page, honor only fades when left unspoken. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and comment below. Type 1 if this resonates with you, or type 2 if you feel there's still more to say.